Greetings, everyone. Welcome to CoLiving Canada. I've got my colleague Mark Powell here in Toronto. It's nice and warm here right now, and Duncan is joining us from Kelowna, BC, where it's not so warm at the moment. Plenty of snow and
sunny Okanagan. Sunny Okanagan. Come on.
Sunny Okanagan. Sunny but cold. We're here today for another episode of CoLiving Canada, and we're going to be chatting a bit about the development process that co-housing fits in, or how it works. And Mark's going to, I think, do a little bit of a summary of the last episode that we did as well, or at least provide some commentary to point you back there in case you haven't seen that session. So Mark, why don't you take point for now and tell us what we're going to be learning about today.
Sure. So what I'll show you right now is just the beginning of some of us what we've seen before, which is looking at the actual steps of the co-housing process. And we really reiterated this in an earlier video is, most of us would like to end up here right away at the top of the stairs. And I want to point out that what we're talking about now is there's a very specific process that we can take these communities through, which not only helps them in the formation of community and building something that they actually need, but also helps them in managing some of the risks that can deal with that, because if you have a process and the risks are lower, and so these are some of the things that we can help with. We did talk briefly again in an earlier video, which you could, those viewers can go back and have a look at, is the actual community formation process of the co-housing process and what happens there. What we're going to talk about this time is the actual co-housing development process, which is the actual property focused piece. So it takes two pieces. One is the needs assessment, understanding what community needs are, and the process of decision making and so forth, which talks about this bottom piece here. Is there a group, find a site, do budgets? And then the next step in here as well, in terms of actually what are the actual programs that we need to have to make sure that all the pieces are accounted for, and then the design and the overall development of the place. So you can see, for example, at the bottom of this slide, there's some examples of where it's gone from a concept to a hole in the ground to the actual development of formation and the occupation of the actual residences. Now, also notice these are all individual private residences that are linked together by community, which have substantial common spaces. And what we do know in the design phase is, as we separate out sort of the wants from the needs, is people then as a group can come to an understanding going, oh, I don't need all the space that I used to have, because we're going to be sharing cars for parking, so we don't need as many cars. We don't need 16 lawnmowers because they're all going to share the task of cutting the grass. And because there's such a huge common space, I don't need to have such a huge living space. In fact, we know people who live in co-housing seldom use their living rooms because they're often in the common space or they're outside. So these are some of the things that come into consideration as these things are being designed. And then through the ongoing community conversation is that those designs and the process becomes more refined. And working with a consulting firm like CoLiving Canada, well, we are accountable to the group then to make sure that these designs are incorporated and that the actual construction part of the project is completed successfully. So that's really what this, from the design and development process perspective, that's what this looks like.
And so, Mark, can you mention or cover a little bit of the ground around the difference between going alone and trying to tackle the development of co-housing projects without support from a consultant versus doing a project with a consultant who can help guide and make sure that the pieces are being put together in the right order, but also that the capacity is being built?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. A good reference point is to look at the recommendation of the Canadian Co-Housing Network, where they encourage visitors to engage with a experienced consulting firm to take them through the process. What we have seen in CoLiving Canada, but also I think some of the data points that are out there over the years, is that a co-housing community trying to do this on their own, the odds are somewhere between 80% and 90% that they will fail, unfortunately. Some will succeed, but most will not. What we also do know is that co-housing communities that follow the process and engage a consulting firm like CoLiving Canada that's been trained in this process, that the odds are something higher than 60%, which is excellent in any development initiative, that these projects will be completed.
Right, right. Okay. And that's important because there's, I guess, a proven process that's been established by those that have actually done this before, have seen what needs to be done, and also how to work with the different service providers and partners to make things happen.
Yes.
Okay. Duncan, did you want to mention maybe the difference between a traditional development and a co-housing development, and sort of the order in which things happen? You feel comfortable touching on that, or maybe Mark,
yeah,
you can.
Yeah, sure. The traditional development, of course, is the real estate developer is the primary mover there, identifies an area that they want to do a development in, will acquire property, get the the planning, the proper permits and planning process and so on, and engage the architect if they're doing the actual housing themselves and so on, and eventually put the housing for sale on the market, and and that's a typical process. Whereas with the co-housing, it's much more focused. We'll call it much more human centric. It's centered on the people who are interested in the process, and then engaging in a process where they begin to really go in depth in what does it really mean to be in community, and how do we do this, and what is it that we need in order to from a living community point of view to accomplish what it is that we want to in our life, and with a major emphasis on quality of life and mutual support and so on. And so that becomes the primary process. And then the secondary level, is, as you mentioned before, the people are the picture, and the frame, the framework is the actual physical development and housing and so on. So it's quite different, and it's one of the reasons why, Mark mentioned there's a lot of failure going forward. It's because this dimension isn't really appreciated. It's thought that we can go ahead with much the same sort of architectural engineering approach, and meanwhile the social side of it, the psychological side, isn't really appreciated sufficiently to result in overall success of the program.
Right. And
I think what I'll add, and Duncan, you mentioned it earlier on, I mean, the issue in Vancouver there, lots of people who want to sell their house and move somewhere into co-housing, but there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. Developers traditionally do not develop with the community's needs in mind. It's sort of a build it and they will come, and that's a typical developer process. The difference is, in our process, is forming community to understand the needs, to then tell the developer what we want. It doesn't take any longer. It might even cost a little less, but the end result is very different. The end result is we actually have something we want to live in, as opposed to something we have to live in because there's no other choice.
Right. And from a developer's perspective, if you've got a community that's already committed to buying the units at the front end, it actually reduces risk. It's going to take more hard work at the front end to get that community formed, but you're also going to have a much better design, something that fulfills the needs of the people that are moving there, but they're of course looking for community. So they're also there to add value to the community that they're moving into, which then provides the opportunity for, influence and contribution to the other larger community, which then makes development, and rezoning or intensification or of density also potentially easier, because you've got something that's really for the people and being led by the people, rather than just as Duncan said, being developed and then hoping that people are going to move in.
Yeah. Great.
Perfect.
Great.
Well said.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. This is, I think, really fantastic. Some really great input today, gents. We're going to have some more topics coming up shortly. Look forward to sharing with all of you, and also hearing from you via our website, which is colivingcanada.com, or info@colivingcanada.com. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Okay.
Thank you.